The City of Penticton is starting construction on the next section of the lake-to-lake all ages and abilities bicycle route. This cycling route has certainly been a hot topic among residents. Some say we don't need it, given there is a bike path along the river channel stretching from Okanagan Lake to Skaha Lake. Some say it's going to cost too much. But there are many residents who believe this lake-to-lake route will provide a gateway from one end of Penticton to the other, which will leave no negative carbon footprint. And some believe this cycling route will provide business commuters with a way of getting to work while their vehicle is still parked in the driveway. We will tackle these topics and more as we delve deeply into the lake-to-lake all ages and abilities bicycle route today on PenTALKton. Hello, Penticton, and welcome to PenTALKton, a podcast from the City of Penticton discussing the hot topics in our community. My name is Dale Corey. I get involved. I know many of you do as well. We do it to help shape our city. This podcast will take a deeper look at some of the conversations that are happening in our city. And boy, oh boy, that lake-to-lake cycling route has everybody talking. Here to put a different lens on the hottest topic in town is the city's General Manager of Infrastructure, Kristin Dixon. Kristin, welcome to PenTALKton.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have you with us to discuss the topic of cycling and to discuss the topic of bike lanes. So, to begin with, are we trying to be the next Amsterdam with all this?
Well, Amsterdam, I think, has over 500 kilometers of dedicated cycling infrastructure. So if we are, we have a long ways to go. But we are definitely moving in the right direction. And the lake-to-lake route is our first section of all ages and abilities infrastructure. And it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah. So let's maybe backtrack a little bit as we get going in this podcast. Give everyone a bit of your history. I know you worked at the City of Penticton in the past. You moved away and then came back. So maybe start off by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I joined the city in 2005, fresh out of university. Learned a whole bunch in my 5 years here. Fantastic place to live and work. Had the opportunity to work in a couple of other places, City of Kamloops, City of Port Coquitlam, and seen just a variety of ways that things have been done. And so when the opportunity came to come back here, my husband is from here and we're going to raise our children here. It was just a fantastic fit. We've got both sets of grandparents, love the community, love the staff at the city. It's just a great all-around opportunity.
Yeah, good stuff. Glad you're here with us. So let's dive deeply into this and talk about the importance to Penticton of providing bike lanes. And maybe you could start with an update on what is happening with the lake-to-lake all ages and abilities route at this point.
Sure. So we are just about to start construction, probably mid-May, on the next section of the lake-to-lake route. That will bring us from Duncan Avenue right to Kinney Avenue, so predominantly along that Atkinson Street corridor. The construction, as I said, is set to start kind of mid-May, maybe towards the end of May, and wrap up by the end of summer is kind of the goal, early fall, depending on some supply chain issues potentially with materials. But over the summer, you're going to see that construction happen in full. So, and as it progresses, will parts of that bike lane maybe open up to cyclists, or will you wait until the whole thing's finished before it all opens up? We'll have to see what the phasing plan looks like from the contractor. There is a couple of chunks that are a little bit more tricky. The Industrial and Atkinson intersection, because we have to widen the creek crossing. And then, of course, the Duncan Avenue intersection is going to be challenging as well. So depending on how it's all phased and sequenced, we'll certainly open it if we can, but if not, you might have to wait till it's all complete. Yeah. Well, let's get some details. What's the purpose of maybe this part of the route? Well, obviously, this is a critical component. It's kind of getting us out of the downtown and starting to get to that south end of town. We're also going to see the section from Kinney to Galt be completed later in the fall as part of the Point intersection. So that's the Pine View roundabout along South Main and the realignment of that Galt intersection. So it's really going to connect to those existing bike lanes on South Main, which is the final stretch of the lake-to-lake route, which we hope to tackle early next year. We're all familiar with that term, Spandex Bandits. So is this lake-to-lake all ages and abilities cycling route only for those Spandex Bandits, or is it for everybody? Well, actually, it's the complete opposite. It's for everybody else for the most part. I mean, not to say that those wearing spandex can't use it, but they still may prefer to use the road if that's their choice. But this route is specifically designed for those who aren't wearing spandex, and whether that's kids, whether that's seniors, whether that's women heading to work like myself, it's for everybody. And that was really the focus of that all ages and abilities classification.
Yeah, and even have to point out that Kristin did ride her bike over to the interview today for this podcast. So way to go, Kristin. So all ages and abilities. Did Penticton invent this idea?
Definitely not. And I'm sure you're hearing it. It's definitely the buzzword of almost every community across Canada and now honestly throughout the world. I think the term was actually coined originally by a National Association of Transportation Engineers. But it's really picked up some speed because everybody can relate to it. It really doesn't have a specific definition because it's applicable to everyone.
Active transportation. Maybe explain that a little bit more. What does that term mean? How does it affect and relate to this cycling route?
Yeah, so the term active transportation is really intended to mean any form of human-powered transportation. And it's funny, I was looking up some definitions earlier from the provincial government, and actually, they include paddleboarding, for example. Depending where you live, kayaking could be a form of active transportation. So it really just means anything where you're using human power to get you from A to B.
Yeah. Is the goal then to eliminate cars in this community?
Absolutely not. And I think, cars have provided a convenience and a form of transportation for many years now. We've essentially designed our communities around it. So we're not naive to think that overnight we could flip the switch and abandon cars. But what we're trying to do is provide choice. And that means whether choice by walking, choice by cycling, and car is just another choice, as is transit. So we're just trying to broaden the options for people.
And maybe let's talk about the idea of a complete transportation approach. Maybe backtrack a bit and explain to us where this came from.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was just speaking to around this idea of a complete street. So ideally, the street should offer solutions for everyone, and they should be able to make a choice on how they want to get around. And again, that could include transit, that can include biking, walking, and taking a car as well. It could also include scooters. It can include all sorts of things as well. I mean, every day I see something new out there.
Kristin, let's talk about the mental health approach to all this, and it's so important. I mean, the physical activity, the exercise that you can get out of it, but it's good for body. It can be good for mind as well. Talk about that a little bit more and how that can help all of us achieve better mental health.
Yeah, and I think it even goes beyond mental health. I mean, you already alluded to physical activity is among the most significant behavior that can influence a person's likelihood of developing chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, stroke, or cancer. But it's not just that. It's the overall feel of this infrastructure in the community. It's noise, it's air, or reduction in noise pollution and air pollution. Mm-hmm. And, it's also about how we interact with each other in the community. Just for example, I was biking the other day and I was stopped at a traffic light, and a gentleman was, working in his front yard doing some gardening, and I was able to have a quick chat with him. Oh, great day for some gardening. And, we were just talking. And again, we only had 2 minutes, but in those instances, you build community because you get to know your neighbors. And so there are all sorts of benefits to it when you get outside of a car and you're not in that little steel box traveling at a speed that doesn't allow for conversation. So, there's so many spin-off. You spoke to the mental health benefits. People who report when they commute to work by biking, and just that start of your day and end of your day. Some people say it's the best time they have for their thinking, and it gives them a chance to clear their head before they get home. So it just really is, it can provide so many other benefits other than just the environmental ones that we spoke to.
Why are bike routes important, and maybe how does it relate to our community climate action plan as we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, the Community Climate Action Plan was a great piece of work that was just completed last year. And it identified that 55% of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from vehicles. And so we know if we're going to make a dent on our community emissions, we need to tackle that tricky area. And so the target in the Community Climate Action Plan is to convert about 14% of vehicle kilometers to other modes of transportation. We're hopeful that around half of those can be active transportation, and the rest can be either, transit or just simply reducing the trips that we're taking if we don't have to take them. Mm-hmm. So it's a part of the solution for sure.
I know when this idea first was floated around a couple of years ago, I wondered about it as well, given that there's a beautiful path along the River Channel all the way from Okanagan to Skaha. So let's get into this a little bit more. Is it possible to have too many bike lanes or bike routes?
So there's two pieces I think that we need to consider. The part along the channel is a fantastic facility, and it is highly geared towards recreational cycling. And we're looking at what infrastructure do we need to provide for everyone, not just recreation cyclists, but also people who are trying to run errands, people who are trying to drop their kids off at school, people who are going to pick up groceries or go to work. And when you're doing that, you don't necessarily want to take the scenic route. You want to get from A to B, just like if you were in your car. If I told you that the Channel Parkway was the only road we had going through town and you had to go all the way around, you'd say, hey, I can't get to where I need to go. And so that is why we need to provide other options.
Yeah. You mentioned school, and so I'm wondering about school kids. Will this help them get to school? Will this lake to lake cycling route be an active way for school children to maneuver their way to go to school in the morning, to get home in the afternoon?
I certainly hope so, and it is one of the reasons why this route was selected. It does go by almost every major school that we have in town, and obviously this single spine isn't going to solve everything. But as we start building out that network, as shown in our master transportation plan, we can start building those connections between our residential neighborhoods, our schools, our work centers, our commercial centers, all the areas that people want to get to.
There's probably some thinking out there, Kristin, that because we have an older demographic in our community, that maybe we don't need bike routes. What do you think about that?
I actually think that as part of our age-friendly action plan, increasing active transportation options for seniors is a key area that we can improve when they start to get older and they maybe want to consider giving up their driver's license, or they're just not comfortable driving anymore. Active transportation can provide an alternative that helps address things like social isolation. And we know that through the pandemic, that was a real issue. And even seniors were trying to get out and get fresh air, and they didn't have a place that they could safely do that.
Yeah. You hear some people talking as well that they don't see that many people in the bike routes. And I know it's still actively getting built at this point for this second phase. So they're questioning it maybe to some degree. And so maybe they think that they're not needed. How do you respond to that?
I think it's really difficult. I think I've used the analogy in the past in some of my discussions with people around, you can't determine if you need a bridge by how many people are swimming across a lake. And, so there is an element of we need to build this. And as people get more comfortable and they see that it's there, they will start to use it. We certainly need to do a lot of outreach. Education is something that we want to do. We know we could partner with, the schools and help teach people how to safely get around our community. That will help encourage use.
Let's talk about finances a little bit. It's always a key part of any project like this. So let's delve into that a little bit more as well. Why do bike lanes cost so much? And is the cost only for the lane, or does that include the other improvements, the bridges that you just mentioned? Explain the financial part of it a little bit more.
So we have included, for example, in this particular project that we're tackling this year is an all-in cost. And that means lighting improvements that benefits the road as well. That includes sidewalk additions, which benefits pedestrians. We've got some utility upgrades going. We've got some road rehabilitation happening. That is the overall encompassing project that includes much more than just adding a cycle lane. And that is why the project is larger than perhaps you might anticipate. But I will say that, when you're building within existing infrastructure and you're having to make changes to things that are already there in a built environment, it's not inexpensive to do that. And so, we try to minimize those costs as much as we can, but we also need to make sure that the infrastructure is safe so it can achieve the intended outcome. Yeah.
I mean, it does cost. It does cost a lot. It's in the millions. So how do we pay for this? Does it involve tax increases? Is that the only way that the city can fund something like this?
Well, I think, for example, look at the sections we did last year. It was a $2.2 million project. $1 million of that was a grant from the provincial government, and $1.2 million of it came from our gas tax, which is specifically used to offset greenhouse gas emissions. So in that case, there was no direct tax component for the first section that's been done to date. This section that's $4.7 million on the books for this year, we are funding that from our reserves, and so that's a one-time cost. A little bit different when you talk about tax increases, because those are usually for ongoing costs that incur every year. But it's a cost to our reserve for sure, and taxes are what pay for that. But I'm really excited because both the federal government and the provincial government are increasing their grant opportunities for projects just like this to support these initiatives. Mm-hmm. And the Federal Active Transportation Fund is going to be $400 million over the next 5 years, specifically for projects like this. So there's going to be great opportunities as we go look at the last section to get some funding for this. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the maintenance of this bike route as it evolves through the City of Penticton from Okanagan to Skaha. What's involved in maintaining the routes, and is it a high cost to maintain them?
The cost itself isn't that significant. We're doing a lot of the same types of maintenance that we do on our roads already, street sweeping, snow clearing, things like that. Certainly the separation of it has been a little bit of a challenge. We did acquire a new piece of equipment that has a lot of multifunctionality in our parks as well. But we were really successful with it over the winter and getting those routes cleared quite quickly. And I think actually everyone was surprised how well it worked. So, yes, there's a small incremental cost to this new type of infrastructure. But again, in the big scheme of things, that's what we're out there to do.
Let's go to another topic and something we all have to deal with in this community. Every community has to deal with it. Crime, theft of bikes. is it a deterrent to cycling? And does the city have plans for, say, bike storage so that when people are encouraged to use their bikes, to use this route, and especially if they're commuting to work, that they can safely keep their bike stored while they're at work?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the second most common thing we hear aside from safe infrastructure is, what do I do once I get to where I'm going? And today was a perfect example for me, kind of in an industrial area and nowhere to lock my bike up. Luckily, I was able to bring it inside. But, that is your fear. You get to where you're going and you have nowhere safe to store it. So a couple of things. One, we've increased our requirements for things like multifamily buildings and to make sure that those facilities are provided when new developments are being built. But we still need to work with people that have already got existing businesses, existing properties, and create those end-of-trip facilities that are necessary to support cycling. And you'll see we've got a variety of bike racks that are already, through the downtown and in lots of prominent locations. But we do need to add that so that you shouldn't have to worry about that you should be able to rely on those amenities being where you're going.
Yeah. And to add to that, there's something that we can talk about as well. It's called Project 529. So explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a fantastic app-based website that you can register your bike on. It's connected to a number of law enforcement agencies. So if anyone finds a bike or reports a bike is lost or stolen, it can quickly connect you back with the owner. So it doesn't necessarily prevent your bike from getting stolen, but if you're registered with them, it can help reunite you with your bike if it is in fact found.
Concern over the bike route. Let's maybe talk about a few areas there and the fact that maybe the bike route actually makes things less safe and has an impact on things like parking and transit, loading and unloading, and maybe ambulances and fire trucks. So maybe talk about it a little bit more. And I know we're all in a situation where we're driving, say, down Eckert and the light turns green, but the bike lane light turns green before the driving lane light does. So explain some of those things a little bit more in the safety aspect of it.
Sure. So I think it's really important when we're talking about those to separate safety versus inconvenience. And I think, for some of those, whether it's emergency vehicles or, this perception that perhaps the separated infrastructure isn't safe, that's just a myth. And the reality is there's been lots of studies done that show that separated infrastructure is the most safe for all road users. It's been shown to reduce vehicle crashes as well where there is safe biking infrastructure, and it reduces impacts or interactions with pedestrians. So it's safer for pedestrians and cyclists as well. So we know that separated infrastructure is the safest, and that is for certain. The whole purpose of the advanced lights is to actually go a step further and get those vulnerable users through the intersection. So for example, the bike light and the pedestrian light go green before the vehicles so that those users can get out of the intersection, so that when vehicles are making turning movements, they don't necessarily have to worry about those other users going at the same time as them. So it really is intended to address those safety issues. Now, I want to talk about the inconvenience because that is probably the hotter topic. And, there is no doubt there is a trade-off between we have a limited amount of space and in the right of way. And so, at times we're having to make tough decisions around how much on-street parking is provided in exchange for providing the bike infrastructure. And there's no doubt that in some instances, when you have to park a little bit further away, that can be an inconvenience. But I think for the most part, businesses we've worked really closely with businesses to work out the logistics of their loading and unloading. Tried our best to accommodate things when we can, provide parking pockets. Perhaps it's not the entire stretch, but where can we provide it? And again, there is a fair amount of on-street parking in this community, and so it just might mean you have to walk a little bit extra to get to it. So fully appreciating that there's some challenges there, and it really comes down to trading inconvenience for parking for safety for cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah. I mentioned that Eckert, Maine, or Martin Corner, Maine as well. I take it you're probably getting some good feedback from cyclists and pedestrians as well, that they get that opportunity to try to cross first and get them out of the intersection before cars do go through.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. I mean, Martin Street is challenging because it's a one-way road with a two-way cycle track. And so as a motorist, you're not used to having to check, that both directions oncoming cyclists when you're on a one-way street. And so there's certainly a period of time where people adjust and get used to these changes in infrastructure and just their patterns and how they drive.
Yeah. So let's talk about this next work that's going to be done a little bit more, and maybe focus on that corner at Duncan and Atkinson. You referred to it earlier. Let's talk about maybe the improvements that you're going to be working on at that intersection at Duncan and Atkinson, and maybe the changes that residents will see with the construction of this next section.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's one of those areas that we hear in town a lot from motorists, not just cyclists and pedestrians around. You kind of got those odd slip lane type merges. It's 4 lanes wide, but you're approaching kind of the driveways to the Safeway, and you're not really sure what lane you're supposed to be in. So it is a bit of an awkward intersection as it stands now. And then you've got the curve and all those other complexities. So as part of this project, we'll be reducing it essentially down to 1 lane in either direction, signalizing that intersection of Duncan and Atkinson. That will work kind of in conjunction, almost like one signal with the one that's at the driveway to the commercial building as well. And it will just really make it clear who goes where and when, and hopefully eliminate all those conflict points, because that is a key crossing from where we're going to get through the Lake to Lake route. So it is important that it's really well done.
Yeah. So since council committed to this Lake to Lake route, several other bike route projects have surfaced. So I'm wondering, where did these come from, and what is the future of bike routes in Penticton?
Yeah, the master transportation plan was quite an undertaking, and it built on, there was a 2012 cycling plan that was completed a number of years ago, 2012, but the master transportation plan really built on what we're looking at in the future. And so it took that lake to lake route, and it added a number of key kind of east-west connections to, again, connect those residential areas with schools, with commercial shopping centers and employment opportunities. And so the master transportation plan is available on our website. It shows kind of the future cycling network map, and a couple of projects that were on there we brought to council a number of weeks ago to get endorsement to apply for this active transportation fund that I was speaking to. And so Green Avenue is one of those projects. It's a perfect connection of the south. It would provide that kind of key east-west tie-in to the spine network. And then the other one we talked about, and it, as you know, got a lot of attention as well, was Lakeshore Drive. We've been hearing from residents about the challenges on Lakeshore Drive pretty much since it was completed. And that's just a sign of its success. It's so well used that there are so many people that want to use it that there's inherent conflicts there. And again, we've got a limited amount of right-of-way. We're going to have to make some really tough choices. If we're not comfortable having bikes on the walkway because the walkway is so busy, where do we put them? Yeah. And it might be fine for the Spandex Bandits to just go on the road and dodge the people backing out of the angled parking. But it's not so comfortable for, a family who's maybe cycling with a 7-year-old or just a family out for a leisurely ride. So we need to find a place for them. And we're going to be in a really difficult situation where we say, okay, do we give up a travel lane? Do we give up parking? Do we give up, what is the trade-off to add that room for cyclists? And that's the conversation that we're going to have to engage with the community on before we get to a decision and start applying for that grant.
Well, I am not a Spandex Bandit, but I do ride on the road because I do go along Lakeshore a lot of times to get to the canal and ride around that way. So maybe just to add to that a little bit more, where does it stand, or what's maybe the timelines to look at Lakeshore and any improvements that could take place there?
Yeah, there's nothing finite. It's not in the budget necessarily to tackle this project anytime soon, but we do want to start talking to the community relatively quickly about it because, as I said, there's going to be tons of grant opportunities that come up over the next little while, and we know that just like Green Avenue is kind of that key east-west connection on the south end of the route, Lakeshore Drive is that perfect east-west connection on the north end of the route, and ties so nicely into the Kettle Valley Trail, the Channel Parkway. There's so many good reasons why that part of the bike infrastructure needs to get completed. And so we want to start that conversation sooner or later so we have a solution when those grant opportunities are available. Yeah.
And maybe let's talk timelines a little bit more. When do we expect this to get started from a work standpoint, a construction standpoint? And I know you mentioned it before, and it'll go through the summer. So how much might that affect things around here from a travel standpoint, given we're a tourist destination?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges we have trying to do construction in a tourist area with our limited construction window as it is already. So we're going to be, as I said, starting probably mid to end of May, trying to go as fast as we can. We do have a constraint of working through the fish window, which is August, around that Atkinson Industrial intersection, just because it's near the creek. But we'll be working to try and get it done as fast as possible, and hopefully early this fall. I do anticipate that, there will be the odd traffic disruptions, certainly as we tackle the Duncan intersection, and again, as we tackle that Atkinson and industrial intersection. But we're also trying really hard. We also know this is kind of the first summer that things are a bit back to normal. We're anticipating a lot of tourism. We're anticipating a lot of events returning, which is fantastic. And we're going to work really closely with the contractor to try and minimize those impacts as much as we can while still trying to get the project done.
Yeah. And I guess maybe we'll emphasize patience. Have some patience on the road. It's not easy for any of us, but with this construction taking place, the easier it is for them to keep working and working hard to complete it. The quicker it gets done, and the quicker we get back to normal and get a new cycling path as well. So a very enlightening conversation, Kristin, and maybe a final thought from you. The future of biking infrastructure in the city of Penticton. Let's look at the big picture to wrap things up today. What do you see happening in the next few years?
I just think Penticton has such a fantastic opportunity. We have the policies in our official community plan. We have the direction in our master transportation plan. We have these great opportunities and ideas. You can basically be anywhere in Penticton on bike in 6 to 7 kilometers, which is a totally doable distance for most people. And quite frankly, even if it wasn't, with the advent of e-bikes and e-assist, it's really accessible to anyone. And so I really think that Penticton, with our weather, our climate, and our just beautiful location here in the Okanagan Valley, the opportunities are so fantastic, and I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, Kristin, thank you very much for coming on. You really, I think, added a lot of insight to the topic. Again, it is such a hot topic in this community, and I think we all just look forward to this being a completed project, to be able to cycle from one end of the community, from one lake to the other lake, enjoy the businesses that are along there, the parks and everything else. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great to see when it's finished.
I agree. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, that is Kristin Dixon, again, the city's general manager of infrastructure. Okay, and just to wrap up, a reminder that construction should mostly be completed by fall, and you can visit penticton.ca for construction updates. You can also go to shapeyourcitypenticton.ca. It is a great place to provide your view and to help shape your city. And with cycling our topic today, a quick reminder, Go By Bike Week is scheduled for May 30th to June 5th this year. Go By Bike Week encourages British Columbians to ride their bikes as much as possible during that week, whether it's to work, to school, for fun, for exercise, to stretch your legs between Zoom meetings, and we've all had enough of those, or to clear your mind. No matter the reason, just ride your bike and hashtag any ride counts. You can check that out. It's a great opportunity to try out using your bike for commuting as well, and you can register at gobybikebc.ca as a solo rider or a team today. We also want to tell you about Project 529. Kristin alluded to that earlier. You can register your bike for free with 529 Garage at project529.com. Report your bike if it is stolen. Search the database if it is recovered. Project 529 is available across North America. And a special shout out to Sarah Tucker and Graphically Hip for providing our recording studio for this episode. If you want to start your own podcast, talk to Sarah. You can find her at www.graphicallyhip.com. Let's all work toward a community which looks after its own, welcomes others with open arms, and continues to provide us with the best place on earth to live. And of course, please join us next time on PenTALKton. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Dale Corey. Until next time, Penticton.